Yeah, how to leverage relationships with recruiting agencies. So we have Neil from Bamboo Crowd, a recruiter and a partner at Bamboo Crowd, a recruiting agency. And the reason why I wanted to have Neil here is a lot of people don't realize that recruiting agencies, hold a lot of the keys to all these roles, right? And building relationships with the recruiters over the long term is a way to get a lot of opportunities sent to you proactively, right? So we talked earlier about how difficult and low probability it is to get jobs through just applying cold. My strategy has always been, no matter if I've been looking for jobs or not, is to create connectivity with recruiters, try to be helpful to them. So I've always, even if I'm not looking and they send me a job, I would try to help them place that job or find referrals. And the reason I did that is so that they would always send it to me first, and then I can see if I would be interested in. And so I think it's a really important strategy in any job search. And Neil's going to give us a frank kind of overview of what that means. And then in the second session, so he's going to do about 30 minutes. In the second section, we have Mike Wilner, who's the CEO and founder of Upside. He's going to talk about building side hustle consulting gigs or careers in consulting, as many people are thinking about fractional work or moving on from kind of full-time work into fractional work. So that'll be another great session. So Neil?
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew, and thanks for everyone to be here. I thought what I might start off with is just quickly, if everyone can raise their hand, like who's currently looking for work at the moment? Okay, so how many people work at a startup at the moment? Okay, so a handful. So my talk's going to be very much startup geared, basically. But before we get into it, I might just do a bit of an intro in terms of myself, and then I'll go into a little bit about Bamboo Crowd as well. So just a quick thing. So I've been recruiting now for 14 years. Originally from Australia, hence the accent. But I've moved over in about 2014. So I've been local here for about 10 years now. And basically what I do is I partner with VCs, growth equity firms, private equity firms, and then founders directly in order to find them specialized talent. And we'll go into a few things. So I think there's a misconception between internal recruiters and external recruiters. Very, very different value adds there as well. But basically, I think the biggest thing that I've learned in 14 years of doing this is relationships, right? It is all about relationships. And I think, the more of those you can have and the more that you can leverage, the more opportunities are going to come your way as well. In terms of, that picture didn't come up, but that's okay. Bamboo Crowd is the firm that I work for. So we're a boutique agency. Our business is split in between two, right? So we've got startups, which is my world. And on my side, we're basically hiring product, engineering, and data science. And then we've got another side of the business, which is more the corporate innovation strategy side of the business, who will work with more of the Fortune 100, 500 companies as well. For today's purpose, we're going to talk more on the strategy side of things when it comes to startups, basically. So that's basically the areas that I focus on. The areas that the other team focus on is strategy, design, and go-to-market. So together we basically cover most sort of areas when it comes to obviously startups and then the more established organizations. That's it. Okay, I don't know why my pictures aren't coming up, but there was a funnel here that basically just wanted to sort of describe where the funnels are and where we sort of fit into it. So I think we were talking before about applications on LinkedIn, on Indeed, or whatever it may be. And I think there's obviously a lot of people that have been laid off. There are a lot of people that have gone through rifts. And I think the pool is just getting bigger and bigger, but it's also getting way more competitive as well. So I'm sure you've all tried to apply for a job, and within the first hour or two, there's 1,000 applicants there, right? So it's a little bit of a black hole. And I think we're trying to navigate. Well, how do we get in front of the client, right? So I think someone asked, should I apply to jobs? My personal opinion is no. I think it's a waste of time. I think getting the referral, working directly with either the recruiter or the hiring managers is a better approach, but we can go into a bit more detail about that as well. So this is where the direct applications are, and again, that's the middle side. The recruitment agencies and where we come into play are basically a lot of these founders are actively hiring, but they're not advertising that they're hiring. There's a Series B startup that we're working with at the moment. They're hiring 7 PM roles, and not one of them are being advertised because they're coming through to us because we are the curated list of product specialists, basically. So a lot of startups anyway do utilize the recruitment agency and the relationship and networks of each individual in that business. The problem with that is we are expensive, right? So when it comes to startups, a lot of startups are trying to do it themselves and trying to obviously move around not having to pay a fee, right? So I think that the problem here is a lot of startups have an appetite to hire. They want to keep their runway, especially if it's like a seed or Series A. They want to keep as much runway as they can. And for them, if they go out to an agency, it can be costly. The flip side of that is if they don't hire that person, they're not going to be able to build the product that they're trying to build as well. So they get to a point where they don't have time to look at 1,000 applications. They don't have time to go through and sort which candidates are qualified, which candidates aren't. And that's when they'll utilize someone like us, basically. So we will hold a lot of that. What Andrew was saying before about the gatekeepers, it's part of it is, people that have been in the space for quite some time also hold these relationships that are, good friends and, candidates that have now become C-level executives that are hiring. And that's kind of what you want to leverage, right? When you're working with a specialist recruitment agency, you want to figure out whether or not they've got the relationships that are going to be specific for the jobs that you're trying to hire for. We'll go into a bit more detail there as well, but basically that's where the sort of funnel is. In terms of the steps that I would take or the steps that I would recommend, right? I think the first thing is find your perfect match. So what I mean by that is you really want to find a recruiter that specializes in your function, right? So if product managers here, if there's engineers, there's data scientists, there's go-to-market specialists, find someone that purely recruits in that space. The reason I say that is because they're the ones that are going to be the closest to the market. They're the ones that are going to know what the salary and compensation ranges are that a startup can offer. And I know that the last conversation was around levels, FYI, and all of that. That works really well on the big tech. I think it's very, very misconstrued when it comes to startups. So I think, obviously, again, the more interviews that you can take, the more people that you can speak within that space, the more you're going to obviously get benefit out of that. I say look for longevity and tenure, and it's not saying that recruiters that have got 5-10 years of experience are the only ones that you should be working with. The reason I say that is the longer that you've been doing this, the more relationships that you have, right? The more relationships you have with the VCs who then introduce you to all their portfolio companies, the more relationships you have with founders that are hiring, right? So again, I think it's important to, again, figure out, who actually sees recruitment as a career, because there are a lot of bad recruiters out there. And I'm sure each and every one of you have probably had an experience with a recruiter, and not a good one as well. So I think, again, you just want to find someone that sees this as a career and someone that actually takes this seriously and wants to help, obviously, you find the right role. Try to avoid generalists. And what I mean by that is if there's a recruiter that's recruiting product, then legal roles, then marketing roles, it's a little all over the shop, right? Again, I would find someone, whatever vertical you're in, that's purely working on product, and then I'll take it one step further. So if your background is fintech or if your background is edtech, find a recruitment agency that has that connection as well. So in our firm, basically, we'll have, obviously, the startup ecosystem, but I have a designated fintech recruiter. I have a designated health tech recruiter. So basically, they partner with the VCs that obviously invest in that space, and then also speak to those companies. They know what's going on in the payment side. They know what's going on in the health tech side. So they're going to be able to give you a lot more upside to your relationship, and they're the ones that I would obviously try to start to establish a relationship with. Find someone who's actively engaged. There is a lot of content out there. There are a lot of videos. There are a lot of I do a Thursday tech tip that's, it's a little cringe at times, but again, it's getting out there and it's giving the information that my candidates want to hear about, right? So again, look for someone that is actively out there, that's attending events, that's going for coffees, because they're the ones that are going to be the ones that have got the relationships that you can then leverage off as well. Make sure you're easy to find. I'm sure some people probably touched on this on the panel today, but I think this is super important. I think, especially when it comes to, I'm specifically talking about tech candidates here now, If you're just putting your job title as product manager with nothing underneath that, it's very hard for a recruiter to figure out exactly what you're looking at, right? So for a product, I mean, product can be broken down into growth, it can be broken down into platform, it can be broken down into technical product managers. So I think the key here is making sure that you've got a clearly defined LinkedIn that actually shows the recruiter or shows the companies what you're actually doing on a day-to-day. So when we get a job rec in, our clients are going to ask, I don't want a product manager, I want a product manager that's worked in fintech, payments, enterprise, basically. Now, trying to find that if you've just got, I'm a product manager, is near impossible, and you might get overseen for that, right? Now, obviously, what we're trying to do here is you don't want to have your LinkedIn as your resume, but just realistically, you want to talk about some of the key points of what you're focusing on, so that way you're easier to find. So once you're easy to find, if you look at this here, right, this person's got product manager, growth acquisition. So I already know if I've got any recs that I need someone that's got that funnel experience, that's someone that I want to speak to, right? Over here, this person's got ML, so it's a little bit more technical. Everyone with ML usually has Python, but the LLMs, which is obviously a big thing at the moment, they're just giving me a little bit more information for me to be like, this is someone that I want to have a conversation with. So when you're trying to develop a relationship with a recruiter, if your profile looks like this, it's clearly engaged, it's clearly articulated, a recruiter's going to want to talk to you, and then even if they don't have the right role for you now, they'll keep you in their pipeline for roles that come up that are better suited to what you're looking for. The bonus points here, stage of startup that you're working at, even the type of startup. I think LinkedIn does a great job, but it also doesn't really advocate to the startup ecosystem. It will have financial services, right? And that's coupled with big banks all the way through to smaller fintechs. So if you're just looking at something and maybe the recruiter doesn't know the company that you're working with, if you've got Series A fintech, it makes it easier, right? So right now, all we're trying to do is make sure that you are highly visible, very easy to find, and for us, it's easy for us to be like, okay, well, we want to speak to this candidate because we've got clients and portfolios that we can talk to you about as well. Step 3, okay, my photos are not working. It's time to engage, okay? So now we've got the profile, the LinkedIn profile looks good, you're happy with that, you want to start to develop a relationship, so you want to start approaching some of these guys. So basically what you want to do is you want to find, obviously the agencies that specialize in your function, and then you want to basically figure out, okay, well, which recruiter do I want to speak to, or which recruiter do I want to talk to? So this basically is like a tailored message to that recruiter. They might not be actively hiring at the moment, but again, it's like there's videos up that they've done. They're commenting on posts. So maybe it's the easiest way to go about it is like, hey, notice that you're currently very engaged in the product space. Wanted to know if we could catch up. I'm a PM doing growth, and I'm looking for my next opportunity. It shows that you're looking and you're taking that extra step to sort of figure out, okay, well, I'm looking and targeted in my approach. I think a lot of people will shoot and pray an application and hope that something sticks. I disagree. I think you should be very tailored and targeted, especially in a market like this, right? We've got a market where so many people are being laid off, so many people have gone through rifts. The competition is fierce. So if you're not really targeted in the way you're going about it, then you're probably going to get overseen, or the client's going to find someone that has that experience that they're looking for. So again, all we want to do is surface the right information and then engage with the right recruiters as well. The do's and don'ts of how to build a relationship, right? So I think this is pretty straightforward, but if you're the top here, it says don't be late or no show. You'd be surprised at how many candidates don't really see the recruitment process as part of what they need to do in order to get their foot in the door with the next round. We hold all of that. Like I think someone said it before. It's just like you're not getting through to the next round if you don't do a good interview with that recruiter, because again, they're going to have other candidates that do. You'd be surprised at how many times we jump on a Zoom. The person's yawning or eating while they're doing their interview. Like, would you do that at a FANG? Absolutely not, right? So it's the same theory, right? Like the way that it's your first impression to us, and then we're then representing you to our client. So basically, if we don't find that we can trust to put you in front of our client, we're probably not going to do it, right? So again, come prepared. Treat this as part of the process, right? So come prepared, figure out what you want out of the interview. Be clear, be concise, and I think that's going to help you obviously get a better rapport. Small talk, I mean, recruiters are pretty social people. Make sure you've got a little bit of banter with them, right? My best candidates and the candidates that I have the best relationships with are people that I'm like, hey, look, I'd like to go to a drink with a drink with them, or I would see them outside of work, right? Those relationships are the ones where I will always give any types of jobs, and I remember that candidate because they've gone above and beyond, right? So again, once this happens and we send your details to the client, a lot of it is cultural fit, right? We know the client, we know what they like, and if you're not presenting that, it's very hard for you to get to the first round of interviews with that client. Be honest and transparent. I think we were talking about compensation before, which again is a conversation that can be quite a large one. If you have a range in mind that you're like, I'm not moving for a minimum of X, I would rather know that so then we don't waste anyone's time. The fact that I think the comment was before is like, you can negotiate while you're in there. In a startup, it doesn't work like that, right? Like in a startup, they've got the budget, they've got the runway, they know the ranges that they're looking at paying, and if you don't fall within it, it's fine. Something else might come down the pipe, maybe a group level comes or the level above comes up later. But if you go all the way through the interview process and at the end, basically like, oh, now I want 250, it's going to fall apart. I don't care how good a candidate you are, they're not going to go up 40, 50 grand on a base when it comes to a startup. Little different, obviously, when you're talking like FANGs and tier ones, but specifically on a startup, like just be honest. And that's the way that, like, again, if you're honest, it's not even about comp, it's about, job title. It's about everything that you have, your main motivators to make a move. If you're upfront and honest about that, we can then match you with maybe someone else. So maybe there's another client that hits the range that you guys are looking for. Or maybe there's another client that basically has got a little bit more work-life balance, right? Because some of these startups are like, we need the person to work, 15-hour days. And maybe you're like, look, I've got a family, I need flexibility. Like, if we don't know that up the front, then all that's going to happen is you're going to go through a process, you might get the job, and then you're going to hate the job, but it's because we haven't been upfront and transparent from the start, right? So again, it's on the recruiter as well to give you a clear indication of what that environment is, but I think the best policy is just be honest and upfront, and then you're going to get the best out of that process. Create common ground, I think we talked about that, right? Like, just have a little bit of banter, have a little bit of like passion when you're speaking to the recruiter. Like, all of that goes a long way. Like, when I come off an interview and the candidate is what I would call a tier 1 candidate, I'm automatically thinking, what can I do with this candidate? Which clients can I introduce this candidate to? Even if they're not hiring, a lot of our founders are very passive in terms of hiring, but when they find that right candidate, they will make that offer, right? So again, it's like, for us, it's basically like, if you've got really, really strong conviction in terms of what you do, and you're also very, obviously create that sort of banter, that relationship with us, we're going to open up a lot of other opportunities that might not be advertised to the rest of the market as well. Bad experiences. This is a huge one. I think everyone's had a bad experience with a recruiter. I have. I'm sure everyone else has as well. Try leave that at the door. I had a candidate the other day come on and actually say basically, this is a fake job, which it's not the best way to start an interview, but it was also a client that, again, was working with us exclusively that wasn't advertising, and yeah, it wasn't on that company website, right? But we got 7 of those jobs. Now, when you start off saying this is a fake job, and meanwhile, we send a deck, we send all the information, the interview process, compensation ranges, like we are very thorough, and then to still have that, I'm sorry, but that candidate I'm never going to put that candidate in front of someone, right? Don't start off a conversation with on the back foot, basically. Reply to the in-mail. The reason I put that up there is there's probably a high chance that even if it's not the right salary range, the right role, the right stage of funding, there's a high chance that recruiter has probably got 5 or 6 other jobs that might be closer to what you guys are looking for. So by not replying to the in-mail, you're sort of jeopardizing yourself, stopping yourself from getting those opportunities that be like, where if you've replied and said, hey, look, like what you've sent me, it's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a Series B and above at 210 and above for my years of experience. We can then at least come back to you and go, fantastic. We can wait until something like that comes closer aligned to what you guys are looking for. So always just be like, again, make sure that you want to, but make sure that you're replying to the right recruiters, because they're going to be able to have other opportunities, even if the one that they approach you with isn't the exact fit for you. building genuine connection. So this is basically I think there was a comment around, how do you get feedback? A good recruiter, if you've got a good relationship with that recruiter, I think it was over here, right? If you get a good relationship with your recruiter, they will give you honest feedback. It might not be exactly what you want to hear, right? But if I now classify you as someone that I can trust and that we've got, I want to work with you continually into other clients, I will let you know where that's faltered, right? Whether it be cultural fit, whether it be whatever it may be, it is a tough pill to swallow. So if you're going to ask for feedback, be ready for the feedback, right? Like you can't get upset, you can't get disappointed. To everyone else's point, there are plenty of other jobs out there. But again, once you develop that relationship, you will start to get that feedback. You will start to realize, okay, well, I didn't get this job because I don't have Series A, like a Series A background. I've never worked at a high growth startup. So whatever it may be, if you've got a good relationship, you likely will get feedback. But again, you need to develop that with your client. If you can meet in person, that would be my number one thing in terms of building a relationship with us. Like if you can meet for a coffee. With that being said, obviously everyone's time is precious, and if I would have to meet every candidate that I met, it would be very, very difficult. I wouldn't have much time to do my job. But again, like as time goes, you can then start to realistically text the person and be like, "Hey, I'm around. Can we grab can we grab a coffee?" Once I've got that relationship with you and you've built that with me, I'm more than happy to do that, right? And most recruiters will as well. We don't want to be sitting behind our desk the whole day. I tell my guys to get out of the office as much as they can. So that's a big one. And I think the more you do that, the more you're going to obviously establish a good relationship with that recruiter, and the more that they're going to give you, basically. Be proactive. So on the feedback comment as well, is we're probably interviewing anywhere between 10 to 20 candidates a week. So sometimes it slips, right? Like sometimes you forget to provide the feedback, or sometimes you forget to get back to someone. Drop them a quick email and just like, "Hey, just wanted to follow up." I guarantee if you do that, they're going to come back to you and they're going to reply to you back on that, right? So just don't expect them to have to always come back through to you. Like, do a quick follow-up, and then if you're not hearing anything back, you're not getting the feedback, then probably that's not the best recruiter for you to work with, right? You want to find the ones that are genuinely going to get back to you, are going to obviously put your needs ahead of theirs basically as well, and really sort of foster that relationship. Andrew was talking about this. If you know someone that's hiring and they're open to using an agency, if you introduce that recruiter is never ever going to forget you, right? Like it's basically the easiest way to get in. Like if you help offer something, right? I think that's just business development in general. Always see what you can do for them, and then they'll obviously be able to do things back for you. It doesn't happen that often. I mean, there's an example here that obviously one of my candidates provided. But again, it doesn't always have to be that either. It's just like, hey, I might not be right for this job, but one of my colleagues actually might be a really good person for it. Can I make the introduction, basically? Anything like that, again, is going to help. And again, I know that I'm doing a lot of like, okay, well, how can we help, or how can you help us? But I think at the same time, it's 360, right? So again, we want to be able to obviously give that back to you. But I guarantee I know every single candidate of mine that has introduced me to a VC, has introduced me to a client, has introduced me to a really good candidate. All of those people are on my phone, and I can text them anytime I want. So that's the type of relationship that you really want to get with a good recruiter that's going to be able to open up doors for you as well. That's it. I wanted to keep it really, really short, sharp, because I know we're running a little over. So happy to answer any questions for you guys as well.
Yeah, let's do Q&A. And one thing I wanted to, we can do applause too. Yeah. One thing I wanted to make sure people continue to remember is Neil's role as a recruiter at a recruiting agency is very different from a recruiter working at a company. So that's why the stronger, kind of more candid relationship is very different, and you get a very different vibe from a recruiting agency versus a in-house recruiter. And that's just very important to keep in mind. And the other part that I mentioned at the very beginning is you have to develop these long-term relationships. It doesn't matter if you're, because you want to leverage it right when you are actually looking. So that means like keeping in touch for years and years, being helpful, helping them do their job so that you get first dibs and first look at anything that they might want to send, because you're at the top of their mind when they have a new role. And they know that you're going to help them, so you're the first one to get a look. And then if it's something you're interested in, you don't refer anyone else. You say, I'm interested in that role, and you try to go through that process. So that's just a really important part of this game.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think like at the end of the day, like everyone, it's such a tough market out there. It's super competitive, and we understand how hard it is. Is like trying to find a job, and maybe it's been a couple of months, right? So that then there's an emotive point of it as well. Someone's talking about how expensive rent is in New York, right? So we're all here to help one another, and I think the more that we can do that, the more that we can obviously get the best out of both worlds, basically.
Great. Let's do some questions. Up right here.
So I have a quick question. I guess for your specific company, it's primarily most of the talent that you funnel through, are they primarily doing horizontal moves in the career, or are you actively helping people move up or transition or make pivots?
Yeah, great question. I think it depends on the candidate, and it also depends on where they're coming from. So like, for example, if someone was at a FANG and they moved to a startup, they're generally going to be able to leverage a higher title and then also more ownership and scope. So we would do a bit of both, right? Like I think majority of our roles though, the majority of our candidates are passively on the market. So they're not actively out there, they're not applying. I'd say that's 90% of us, right? So when I find, let's call it a product person, right? A senior PM, the only way that person is going to be enticed outside of comp is ownership, scope, and title, right? So we would be able to leverage that and be like, look, I know that you're passively on the market, but if we were able to get you a director position, is that something you'd be interested in, right? So there is a little bit of like the upwards mobility as well. Again, it just depends on the size of stage of company, and also your years of experience. I think the one thing that I will say is it was title inflation in 2021 when the market was hot. Was ridiculous. They were giving out director titles to people with 2-3 years of experience, right? So I think now what's happened is they've realised that, okay, well, 2-3 years of experience isn't at the director level. They've had a little bit of humble pie. A lot of these are FANG candidates, had a little bit of humble pie, and are now like, okay, well, I would take a senior PM role because I've got 3 years of experience if it's the right opportunity for me and I get the right upside. So to answer your question, circle back to your question, it's a bit of both. I'd say most of it is leveraging a better role for you, basically, is where we would, rather than a lateral. Yep. Yeah. It's a good question. I think the hard thing about that is when a startup comes to us, they're looking for 9 out of the 10 boxes ticked, right? Like they're paying a pretty decent fee to obviously use us. So for us, it's like someone was talking about the job description before. Like we need to find all of it basically, and some, right? There are sort of segues around it though. Like if we've got a really good relationship with a seed stage founder, and they're like, look, we're just looking for someone that's tenacious, that's young, ambitious, that wants to get into the startup space, and can prove that they've worked in like a really strong 0 to 1 project or something like that. There are ways around it, but I'd say most of our clients, when you come into an agency, they're looking for the best of the best. So it is a little harder to go from non-tech into tech, but there are ways around it.
Let's do 2 questions here. Who hasn't had a question? Who hasn't been able to ask a question yet? Is everyone so far? Oh, all right.
I got you, man.
Hi. So I am a student and an international student, and I am on a clock.
Yeah.
Now, I think most of the times when I've tried to connect with recruiters on LinkedIn, and I'm just going to put this as a general, there are 2 types of recruiters. One who are very active and have a very strong online presence, but they end up being the ones who do not respond. And the other category has often been with, like recruiters do not advertise themselves in that case. So how do you, what are the ways that you would recommend? Because I come from a non-tech background with 5 years of work experience. Moving into tech, I have 2 years of my degree program, which should count towards it. And because I am not from the US, I don't have those social networks. So I'm building those from ground up. What would be, strategies that you would recommend for me and people like me in this situation?
It's a great question, and I think when it's such a candidate-rich market, it becomes a lot easier, right? Like again, if we go back to 2021, where clients couldn't find candidates, It was very, very easy at that point to be like, okay, like you need to interview this candidate. They've just done their MBA. They may be on a STEM, I'm assuming you're on at the moment. And they're a lot more flexible, right? Because they're not spoiled with choice. At the moment, clients are spoiled with choice. And to the point of like, we've got clients that will say, we want fintech, we want them to have payments experience and payments into enterprise at X amount of revenue. Like, it is ridiculous. So like, it's very hard for that type of person to be like, okay, let's recommend someone that doesn't have all of the. Now, it's a pendulum, right? So I've already started to see this year, it's starting to come back into the middle, right? It's not a candidate-driven market yet, but it's on the way down, right? Clients are starting to struggle to obviously hire again. There's obviously, there's more competition based. So you just need to time the market in order to get the relationship. The easiest way, I think someone was talking about it before, is networking, right? Like, oh, I noticed that you're connected with, or your friend, or you're connected with, and hopefully you've got a few mutual connections there. Leveraging that is probably a nice way of going about trying to get in. I would also say potentially the recruiter below, so like instead of like the partner that's probably got like 15 different people under him, the recruiters under them basically will be doing a lot of the heavy lifting as well. I don't know, on your thoughts in terms of the visa side of things as well, Andrew, like when you were a hiring manager, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult conversation.
Yeah, with recruiters are trying to be efficient with their search. That's like if you have to think what's their business. So I can see that might be a little bit of a tougher path. And you have to think startups are also trying to be very efficient. They have very little time. So you might not get a lot of attention because they're thinking like, oh, I've got to go through this process. So you might just have to fish in different grounds where that isn't that bad. That isn't a major consideration. So it's just kind of a reality of the process. You just maybe have to focus on bigger companies.
I think also on that as well is cut us out, right? Go directly to the source, go to the founder, go to the VP of product, go to the VP of engineering and see if you can cultivate a relationship that way. Because that way they don't have to pay a fee for you got to make it as easy for the startup as well, right? So maybe there's a way of going around that way, but it's very difficult from a recruitment standpoint. Like I can tell you how many Aussies come to me because I'm an Australian. I've never placed one person on an E3 visa, right? I've got all my friend at my wedding was giving me shit about not finding him a job in 5 years, you know what I mean? And that's my best friend. So the visa side is very, very difficult. I agree with Andrew, like maybe trying to find another way in is probably the way to go about that. Maybe like an internship after your MBA was always a good way of getting your foot in the door. So maybe trying to get a few internships on your record and then sort of leverage that.
Okay, one last question over here, and then we'll have Mike come and do his session.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Edna Aya. I'm curious, I know you recruit predominantly with product and folks. So I've worked in product for a few years now. I'm curious what you've seen as far as trends outside of product management. So I've worked primarily in product implementation and product operations. What are you seeing in that space with startup founders?
Yeah,
I've also worked in startups.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing an uptick in that product operation side of things. We actually just picked up a role recently of it. It didn't sit on my front because I'm more traditional PMs, is sort of my track record. But there's definitely more, I guess, startups are being very creative in terms of like, because PMs have got a very high price to them as well, right? They're not a cheap hire. So they're like, okay, well, maybe if we divide some of the product duties, right? Like I do also feel like some of the other trends is like we're less, product managers are less on the strategy now. It's more on the execution, right? Like a lot of the strategy is reserved for a CPO or the founder, right? When you're paying a CPO, let's call it $400,000 or $500,000, you need to justify why we're paying that person. So a lot of the strategy is now going to the senior leadership, but then a lot of PMs want that strategy side of it, right? So it's kind of like, so they're starting to create different like levels, and what we've definitely seen over the last couple of months is the product lead, the product group and principal levels have been huge because no one's really hiring the director level because again, they can't justify it, right? So I think what we're going to start to see is like that, and this is across all, this is engineering, ML, this is data science, more and more duties are going to be stripped out and then sort of try to sort of like make the job a little easier and spread out a little bit as well. But it's evolving. It's actually really interesting.
So, sorry, what I'm taking from you then is product operations doesn't necessarily sit under product. It's maybe more under
it's like
operation.
like biz ops.
Like, yeah, exactly.
But it's still,
okay.
I mean, it's still working with engineers. It's still working with product people. You're still doing a lot of the same functionality. I do feel like sometimes though, like some clients are trying to get away with just calling it like a product owner or a product ops person, so they don't have to pay the $200K for the product manager, right?
This is true.
So that's kind of what
Thank
we're
you.
seeing.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Okay. Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it.